All right. Thanks for, well, I'm thankful for that 7-minute break as well, because I got a chance to run and do all the stuff I needed to do. But getting back to business, we're going to move in right ahead with our next presenter, who is Dr. Gordon. She is from Kingston, Jamaica. She earned her doctoral degree in clinical psychology from Immaculata University. Her master's degree is in counseling psychology from Immaculata University as well, and her bachelor's degree in nursing education from Northern Caribbean University. She has held various positions in nursing, behavioral health, and higher education. Her current work is with children and adolescents treating a broad spectrum of mental health disorders. Dr. Gordon worked with Crozer Keystone Health System, also involves collaborating with educators to provide optimal mental health support for high-risk students in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. Without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Gordon.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm so happy that you took the time to be with me this evening. For the next hour or so, we're going to look at something that I think is important and relevant to all healthcare workers, and especially nurses. We're going to talk about workplace stress and self-care for nurses. Can I just see an indication of those of you who are nurses? Just put your hand up or something. So most people who are on right now are actually nurses, yes?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I think this is going to be very relevant to you. And I'm going to basically go through the presentation. And at the same time, if you have questions, please either put the question in the chat, or we'll have a time afterwards that we can answer questions, okay? So working in the healthcare field can be stressful, as I've mentioned before. Usually people who go into nursing and other healthcare professions, they have a desire to help people. And so this very desire to help people can end up being the trigger that leads to something that we call burnout. Let me share my screen with you so that you will be able to follow as I go along. taking a minute here, but I believe everyone should be able to see my screen now. Okay. All right. So the fact that individuals who go into nursing and other healthcare professions tend to be individuals who want to give compassionate and competent care to others. That's a strong motivator for going into the healthcare field. The problem is that this type of care, this type of compassionate, competent care is increasingly being compromised as nurses and other healthcare workers try to do more with fewer resources. Many nurses are actually exhausted as they try to maintain the balance of empathy and compassion with being overwhelmed by human suffering. Nurses are prone to experiencing high degrees of stress, and stress is an undeniable factor in the lives of healthcare workers. So I'm talking about stress. What is stress? Stress is a physical, mental, or emotional strain or tension. It is a specific response by the body to a stimulus such as fear or pain, and the pain might either be physical or emotional. And this fear or pain disturbs or interferes with the normal physiological equilibrium of an organism. It is manifested behaviorally in the form of worry or anxiety. But most times when we talk about stress, we think about it as a negative thing. The reality is that there are two types of stress. One type of stress is referred to as eustress. And this is a type of stress that motivates us and causes us to focus our energy. So for example, you know that you have an exam coming up, or you have a presentation to do, or something that creates a certain amount of a little bit of worry. It's actually good for us, because that is what motivates the student to say, oh my goodness, my exam is in 1 week. I really had better settle down and start studying, right? So that's a good thing. It gives you that little zing that causes you to want to do what you need to do. And so that's good stress. It's usually short term. Once you've done the thing that you were pressured to do and everything's over, that stress goes away. It is it's perceived by us usually as something that we're able to cope with. So it's within our coping abilities. Actually, it's a little bit exciting. You know, like when you're looking forward to your wedding, for example, and so you feel nervous and oh, is everything going to go all right? Or you're going to give a speech or something like that, and that it's exciting. It improves performance, because that energy, that pressure to do what you need to do actually makes you do it really well. But then there's distress. Distress causes anxiety or concern, gets you worried, gets you anxious. And it can be either short-term or long-term. The problem with distress is that we experience it as something that is outside of our coping abilities. And that's what makes it so negative. It feels unpleasant. And it decreases performance. It interferes with our ability to function as well as we would normally function. It can lead to mental and physical problems. So there are some major causes of stress. It goes all the way from minor hassles, like can't find my hair clip today, so, you know, I have to end up doing a different hairstyle or something like that. That's just a minor hassle. You don't like it, but I mean, it doesn't really change anything much, except your hairstyle. And then there are frustrations. Frustration happens when you have a goal and you're trying to achieve that goal, and there is a barrier or barriers that prevent you from achieving that goal. And so that's a little bit more disturbing than the minor hassles of the day. And then there's outright conflict, where your goals and somebody else's goals don't match. And so you kind of butt heads and you have a conflict. And how you deal with the conflict, we're not talking specifically about conflict resolution today, but it's kind of relevant in the sense that if you have a conflict on the job, for example, a conflict with a supervisor or a conflict with a coworker, that can actually color your view of your whole work environment. And if you haven't developed conflict resolution skills that will allow you to deal with the conflict, you might withdraw, or you might compromise, or you might actually accommodate, act as if everything's okay. You know, so that there are ways that people deal with conflict. There are people who avoid conflict at all costs. Doesn't matter what the thing is, how bad they feel about it, they're going to find a peaceful way to just kind of withdraw and shrink into the wall. Or they're going to accommodate. And when they accommodate, what they do is they pretend that everything's okay. You don't mind, do you? And you say, oh, no, it's okay. It's all right, really. But it's not all right. So there's that problem still inside of you that's creating stress because you haven't dealt with it. You said it was okay and it's really not okay. And then there are people who compromise. So they put their thoughts and their ideas on the table, and they listen to your thoughts and ideas, and you kind of bring them together and try to come to a compromise where you win a little, I win a little, but nobody wins everything. And then there's collaboration, where you come together to find a common goal that you can both work on effectively towards resolving the conflict. And then there are cataclysmic events. Cataclysmic event would be something like a hurricane. I've lived through one hurricane in my life, and it was Gilbert. I actually was in Jamaica for a funeral. And the very day before the day that I was supposed to return to the United States, I didn't really want to come back, mind you. I have to tell you, love Jamaica. I'm Jamaican and I want to be there, but I needed to come back. And the very day before Gilbert came, and I don't ever want to live through a hurricane again, if possible, but we don't have any control over that. And that's the problem with cataclysmic events. We usually don't have any control over them, and they're dreadful, and they have long-reaching effects. Cataclysmic event, a hurricane, earthquake, a fire, major event. And then there are life changes. So, as we develop from infancy to old age, we go through different stages of life. And there are events that take place usually at regular points in time, expected points in times. And so these life changes can sometimes create stress. For example, one life change that could create stress, doesn't have to, is menopause for women. Sometimes that's a stressful time of life for women. Another thing that seems to be a pleasant event that could actually be a stressful event is a wedding. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the movie Father of the Bride, but that father went through some things, when his daughter got married, right? So that's a life change that could create stress. And then there are chronic stressors. Chronic stressors are stressors that last a long time. So of course, at first, the stressor might cause some pain, whether physical or emotional. But over time, that stressor causes suffering. It's ongoing. It rubs at the same spot over and over and over and over again, and it starts to affect your health, your physical health and your mental health. And then today we're speaking specifically of job stress. And anything that I've talked about so far, minor hassles, frustrations, conflict, not usually cataclysmic event unless you're in a mass shooting or something. Life changes, chronic stresses, all of those could actually impact your job situation. So job stress is our focus for today. And let's look at what happens when we're stressed. The most common symptoms are emotional distress. So there's some combination of anger or irritability or anxiety. We also have muscular problems like tension headaches. Just got this headache and it won't go away. And all it is really is that you're stressed. Back pain, jaw pain, muscular tensions that lead to pulled muscles and tendon and ligament problems. Stomach, gut, and bowel problems such as heartburn and acid stomach, flatulence, diarrhea, constipation, and irritable bowel syndrome. Persistent tension headaches, migraines, hypertension, chest pain, and heart disease. One day this week, my blood pressure went up so high, I was wondering, what am I stressing about? And I don't even know. because you know about how hypertension is that silent disease, that sometimes you don't even have symptoms and you don't know what's triggering it. And there are many causes of hypertension. But our topic is not hypertension today, so I'm not going to stay there. So there are 3 stages in our reaction to stress. There's the initial alarm reaction, when our brain is informed that there is something happening that we don't like, that doesn't feel good. And then there's the resistance phase. During the resistance phase is when we're trying in some way to adapt to the problem that's occurring, that's causing us stress. But over time, we can actually get to the point where we go into an exhaustion phase. This is where chronic stress, it becomes so painful, or it affects our immune system to such a degree that we're not able any longer to cope with the stress. And then is when we really have difficulties and problems physiologically or mentally. There are 2 aspects of the response to stress. There's what we call the SAM system, which is the sympathoadrenomedullary response, which involves the sympathetic nervous system, the adrenal gland, the medullary area of the adrenal gland. And so what happens is that the sympathetic nervous system is triggered when we're stressed, and it activates an area of the adrenal gland, which is the medullary area of the adrenal gland. This area produces norepinephrine. Norepinephrine increases heart rate, it increases blood pressure, respiration, and muscle tension. It decreases digestive processes, and it constricts blood vessels. And anybody who has experienced any degree of stress will be familiar with these responses, because you feel your heart beating faster, you feel your breathing changes, and you feel tense. Your pupils also your pupils also constrict at this time. What is really happening is that your body is preparing for what we call fight or flight. So with this movement of energy towards your muscles, the digestive processes are slowed down, because everything now is geared up to your muscles to help you to either fight or fly. Depending on what the danger is, it might be appropriate to flee, or it might be appropriate to fight. But your body is so designed to meet any of these situations. So actually fear and anxiety and stress are ways in which our bodies get messages that there is a problem and we need to deal with it. And then you have the hypothalamic pituitary adrenocortical axis response. And in this response, this is slower than the SAM system that we just talked about, but the effects last longer. So in this system, the pituitary gland, that master gland, is activated by the the pituitary gland activates the adrenal cortex. So remember that in the first system, it was the medullary area of the adrenal gland that gets activated. But in this system, the pituitary gland activates the adrenal cortex. And the adrenal cortex releases corticosteroids. A major corticosteroid that is released is cortisol. Cortisol raises the glucose levels, it increases metabolism, thereby increasing energy. It also sends messages to the pituitary to regain homeostasis. So these are some of the physiological responses to stress. Stress becomes dangerous when it interferes with our ability to live a normal life over an extended period of time. So we can tolerate, short-term stressors, but what really does damage to our physiological functioning and our mental functioning is when that stress is extended over time. Stress can cause emotional and physical damage. Chronic stress kills through suicide, violence, heart attack, stroke, and perhaps even cancer. So when somebody says stress can kill you, they mean it literally. Stress can kill you, not directly, but indirectly. Because stress affects our immune system, and in turn, when our immune system is compromised, it is more difficult for our bodies to resist certain disease organisms. Because physical and mental resources are depleted through long-term attrition, the symptoms of chronic stress are difficult to treat and may require extended medical as well as behavioral treatment and stress management. So over time, if one experiences stress, particularly in the workplace, they might develop what we refer to as burnout. And burnout is a global nursing workforce challenge that undermines nurse retention. In other words, burnout is not just something that happens in the United States of America or in England or in Australia. It happens in Jamaica too. Nurses in particular are prone to this problem, and it has the effect of damaging nurse retention. You will know and understand that there is a nursing shortage worldwide at this time and has been for a while. Burnout is defined as emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It impacts nurses' lives, personal lives. It impacts the patients that they take care of and the organizations that they work for. So it's a multidimensional problem. So back in the 1970s, there was a psychologist, an American psychologist by the name of Herbert Fredenberger, who first used this term burnout. And he used this term to describe a condition in which individuals become extremely stressed and anxious and tired. They're physically and emotionally tired. Then in the 1980s, more studies were done in relation to this phenomena of burnout. Two researchers by the name of Maslach and Jackson. Maslach and Jackson. They studied the emotions of health professionals in the workplace. They actually developed an instrument that is used to measure the level of burnout in healthcare professionals. Physical and emotional fatigue that result in loss of motivation for work and sometimes even total exhaustion and a sense of failure are features that are common in burnout. In 1982, Maslach invented the burnout inventory. This is actually the most widely used instrument that's used to measure burnout. It's been found to be reliable and valid, not just in the United States of America, but cross-culturally in various countries around the globe. So it's an excellent tool to use if an organization, for example, wanted to know how are nurses doing? Are they having symptoms that might indicate burnout? This would be an excellent tool to implement. So the topic of burnout is extremely relevant and it's extremely important. Investigations of nurse burnout are highly relevant given the global shortage of nurses and the need to retain qualified nurses in clinical care roles. Nurse burnout has been associated with patient dissatisfaction and other measures of deficient care quality. So most, if not all, institutions are concerned about their quality of care, because when a patient comes into a hospital and what their experience in that hospital is likely to be shared with others, and if it's a negative experience, that then begins to give the hospital a negative reputation. And so all hospitals, I imagine, are concerned about the quality of care. And this care about quality is also something that nurses tend to share, because nurses in general, they go into the profession because they care about people, they want to help people, and when they're not able to do so to the optimal level, it causes distress. As a matter of fact, okay, so my PowerPoint is slowing down on me here, but as a matter of fact, I want to point out that in Jamaica right now, this is a current problem. As was mentioned, there we go, as was mentioned recently by the president of the Nurses Association of Jamaica. She says that the number of nurses in Jamaica, ooh, I just lost my PowerPoint. I am so sorry, hold on one second.
We're still seeing it.
We're seeing it.
You're still seeing it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm not seeing it. Hold on a minute, please. Let me just see if I can get that back.
Maybe stop share and then come back.
I don't know, because you can see it. Oh, stop sharing and then come back to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me try that. That was interesting.
In the meantime, let me just remind you that the only way for us to certify you or issue a certification for this seminar is that your video camera has to be on.
Okay. Are you still seeing my PowerPoint?
No,
Hello?
no.
You're not seeing it anymore?
No.
No. Are you trying to share again?
Let me try it again. Let me try it again. Try that again. Oh boy.
In times like these, we have to expect these these technical difficulties. Everybody is online, right?
Are you seeing it now?
No.
No.
Okay, think of a question that you want to ask me. Now is a good time to use this time. Now is a good time to come up with a question. Put it in the chat.
I have a question.
You have a question, go ahead.
So you mentioned that cortisol, when you have the release of cortisol, that it speeds up your metabolism, but it also gives you energy. But I was also of the opinion that cortisol.
Go ahead.
I was also of the opinion that cortisol causes you to gain weight.
Yes, it does. It does. I didn't go into that part just because, well, you know, I wasn't on that topic. But what happens is that when epinephrine is produced by the adrenal gland, the medullary area of the adrenal gland, it speeds up your reactions. Cortisol is a slower. It also helps you. It increases energy, but it also it's a slower process. So it comes into effect slower, and it stays in the body slower, and it raises the blood glucose level, and that's a whole nother presentation. But it raises the blood glucose level, I'm sorry, decreases the blood glucose level, and therefore causes the person to feel hungry more easily because their blood sugar is low, and therefore it tends to cause people to overeat because of that reason. And so in effect, over time, it can cause increase in weight. But honestly, I think that we actually give too much credit to the cortisol effect, but that's just my opinion. That's not textbook. I think that a lot of times the thing that we blame for the weight loss is not so much the thing that's causing the weight loss. It's more a matter of discipline and changes in behavior. But that's my viewpoint, not a textbook definition.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, here we go again. Let me try this one more time.
Yep. We're seeing it.
You're seeing it, but you're not seeing the slideshow view yet, right?
No.
Okay, here we go. I'm not sure that we're starting at the correct one. I think we stopped at importance of the topic. And I was about to tell you what our
The president, the NHA.
president of the NHA. Yes.
Yeah.
There we go. It just takes a little time. That was one of my little minor hassles, okay? My minor hassles. It doesn't even reach the point of frustration.
A little stress. A little stress.
Right. Okay, so I was going to tell you that the president of the Nurses Association of Jamaica recently made these statements that were published in the Gleaner on February 10th of this year. And she said that the number of nurses in Jamaica have reduced significantly in the last 2 years. In 2018 and 2019, we lost over 1,100 nurses. And it wasn't just to migration, although even migration sometimes is an indicator of stress, of a stress. Did somebody say something? Okay, all right. The Jamaica Midwives Association second vice president, Bobby Joe Campbell, also says that urban and rural health centers are short on midwives, but they're coping under the pressure. So there seems to be a lot of tension and stress that nurses are experiencing in Jamaica, and it's causing attrition. The health sector is operating with 52% less than the staffing that they need for the entire public sector, both from a midwifery perspective and the general nursing perspective. Now, if you're currently working in any of the hospitals or clinics in Jamaica, I am sure that you could probably tell me, not probably, you could tell me more about what it feels like with the increasing demands for healthcare services. It's putting an unprecedented strain on health systems and the workers within them. Many individuals are experiencing burnout, depriving health systems of their most vital resource, people. Sometimes we think that equipment and skills are the most needed resources, but it's actually the people. People are the most important resources, not only in the healthcare system, but particularly in the healthcare system. It's necessary for us to be concerned, for individuals who are in administration and policy making, to be concerned about the mental health and well-being of their workers, their nurses and other healthcare professionals. So here's the process that happens with burnout. First, there's too many demands on the strength and resources over a prolonged period of time. Plus, there are high expectations and deep personal involvement in the work that one does. So there are all these demands. There are fewer resources, fewer people to do the work, fewer equipment to actually carry out the functions. And then there are high expectations from administration, high expectations from the patients, high expectations from the patients' families. And at the same time, the conscientious nurse wants to do a good job. She wants to do a competent, compassionate job. And so, but the two things are in conflict with each other. The lack of resources is in conflict with the high expectations. And then if there are too few actions taken to replenish the energy that's consumed in meeting the demands, you get burnout. The burnout syndrome kind of looks a little bit like this. I'm so tired that my tired is tired. I mean, that's tired, okay? That's a physical, emotional, you're draining, you're done. You just about had it up to your eyeballs with this. You can't take it anymore. And so three major features of burnout. One, exhaustion. The person is exhausted because you've been trying. It's that second phase of the stress response. You've been trying to cope. You've been trying to cope with the 12-hour shifts. You've been trying to cope with one nurse to 18 patients. You've been trying to cope with the lack of equipment and the having to. I started my nursing career in Jamaica, and I very much remember a lack of resources at the particular hospital where I was working at the time. And having to make do and having to be very creative. And I can understand how doing it over a long period of time could actually lead to burnout. So exhaustion. And when the person is so exhausted that they're not able to use their inner resources anymore, they become cynical. And anything that, say, administration says, we're going to have a meeting at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in such and such an auditorium. And you're like, they're always having these meetings. I'm not going, you know, or, oh, we have these meetings all the time and nothing happens as a result of it. You become cynical, or you become cynical even in your care of the patients. You know, these people, they're just drug addicts, you know. I mean, they're just coming there because they want medications. She doesn't really need this medication. And then you become cynical. Oh, yeah. Okay, so everybody thinks they're special. So she rings her bell and she expects me to just come running in there, right? That kind of way. It's getting really bad now. And then what happens sometimes is that the person becomes inefficient, because some of the things that happen to the individual who has reached this breaking point leads them to become clumsy or careless. And so they now become inefficient. And that kind of compounds the problem, because now the person is actually making mistakes. It could be a medication error, or some other important error. And then guess what? The nursing sister or the matron is now on their case. They have to go have a meeting because they made this really bad mistake. And sometimes the understanding of what is actually going on with the person might not be there. And so the person might even get fired. And at that point, the person might not even care because they are burnt out. I mentioned before about the Maslow burnout inventory that is so widely used and that is so efficient across cultures, so that if administration were interested in knowing just how their nurses are doing, how well or how well they're doing or how stressed they might be, this would be a good measure to be used to actually find out objectively what is happening. Causes of burnout include lack of control, unclear job expectations, dysfunctional workplace dynamics, extremes of activity, lack of social support, and work-life imbalance. Work-life imbalance affects not only the job, but it affects the home and personal relationships.
No.
So what are some coping strategies? When your stress level exceeds your ability to cope, you need to restore the balance by reducing the stressors or increasing your ability to cope, or both. So you're either going to, we're designed to function in balance, in what we call homeostasis. And to restore that balance when it is out of balance, you're either going to have to reduce the stress or increase your ability to cope, or a bit of both would actually be the ideal. Some people choose unhealthy ways of dealing with stress. Some of these unhealthy coping strategies include smoking, drinking alcohol, overeating, zoning out for hours in front of the TV or computer, withdrawing from friends, family, and activities, sleeping too much, procrastinating, or filling up every minute of the day to avoid facing problems, or taking your stress out on others, so you might lash out in angry outbursts or even physical violence, either at home or in the workplace. Some positive coping strategies, you want to try to avoid perfectionism, because some of the times, one of the reasons why people experience burnout is because they expect too much of themselves. They don't give themselves a break. So, if you made the slightest error in judgment or the slightest, you didn't meet a promise that you made or something, it becomes a major event, as opposed to something that just happened and, you'll learn from it and move on to the next thing. Another coping strategy is to develop assertiveness skills. And sometimes people actually have to be trained to be assertive. And there's a difference between being assertive and being aggressive. So the passive person is the one who never speaks up for themselves, who never take a proactive stance. The aggressive person is the person who has to hurt somebody to get to what they want to do, whether physically or emotionally. The assertive person is the individual who is able to speak their truth and their needs clearly without having to hurt anyone in the process, or without intentionally hurting anyone in the process, because sometimes you can hurt people without intending to. Learning to manage anger management, balancing your work and life, balancing your work life with your home life, avoiding procrastination, because usually the longer you put something off, the more stressful it becomes. You have something to do, the best thing to do would be to manage your planning and taking that thing that you have to do in small steps, doing a little bit at a time until you get it done, rather than saying, oh, I'll get it done tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and you say, I'll do it next week. And you keep doing that until you get to the place where you don't get it done. And some people do that. Even nurses do that on the job sometimes. They have tasks that they must complete before the end of the shift. And because of procrastination, they end up not doing it. And then at the end of the shift, they end up having to stay overtime, and then they get frustrated and angry because they're working extra long hours. Seen that happen. Changing your self-talk, because what we say to ourselves really influences what we believe about ourselves and how we behave. So change your self-talk. If you have a tendency to say negative things to yourself, or to really be awful to yourself, change that self-talk. Say something positive. Reframe the situation and try to see it from another perspective. Learn to laugh. I tell you, one of the greatest stress busters is to learn to laugh, especially at yourself. Because I guarantee you that if you haven't done it yet, you will do something stupid somewhere along your lifetime. And the best thing to do with it, laugh at it. You know, so long as it didn't hurt anybody and nobody died in the process, you just felt a little embarrassed, you'll live. So learn to laugh at yourself, and accept help. It's okay. Just because you need help on a situation doesn't mean that you're incompetent, doesn't mean that you're foolish, doesn't mean that you're stupid, all those horrible negative things that people say to themselves. It just means that right now, you don't know all that needs to be known about this particular thing. Somebody else knows it. They tell you, you learn. The next time you face that same situation, you now know. Now you're the expert and you can teach somebody else. So don't worry about it. We don't have to be perfect. Some really simple lifestyle interventions. I have 3 that I like to emphasize, but I'm going to give you the whole list first. Diet, exercise, sleep regulation, relaxation techniques, creative expression, and faith-based activities. Now, diet, exercise, and sleep regulation are basic. Honestly, if you were to just get enough sleep, a lot of the other things that go wrong probably wouldn't go wrong. Because, you know, sleep deprivation can really hinder our efficiency. It reduces our ability to think clearly, to make decisions, to make good judgment. Sleep, it affects our relationships, because if we don't get enough sleep, we're irritable, we're easily angered. So sleep is extremely important. Now, I know that for nurses, some nurses are probably saying, yeah, I wish I could get enough sleep because, you know, I work night shift, and night is what was designed for us to sleep, right? And not everybody can make that adjustment to night shift, although some people love it. But the irregular hours that nurses sometimes have to work is a source of stress in itself. And so we really have to be very disciplined and very proactive and assertive in making sure that we are doing what is actually best for us. Because sometimes in serving others, we fail to serve ourselves, and you cannot serve others if you have not first served yourself well. And it seems counterintuitive, but I would even go to the great book, the Bible, that says you should love others as you love yourself. Therefore, if you don't love yourself first, you don't really know how to love somebody else. I mean, just think about it. If you're so unkind to yourself that you will not take care of yourself, what in the world would motivate you to take care of somebody else? If it's okay for you, I guess it's okay for everybody else too, right? So it is very important to take care of oneself, and sleep is critical. We need it for rejuvenation, for resetting the brain and the other parts of the body. Rest is important. We're designed to work and then rest. Work and then rest. You can't keep working nonstop. We're not designed to function that way. Something's going to break down. Diet. What you put into your body affects how you function. It affects how you think. It affects your energy level. It affects your ability to reason and make good decisions. Diet is extremely important. There are certain elements that are required in our diet. And it's just really basic. I'm telling you basic stuff that I know that you know, but we need to be reminded sometimes. So you need your protein. You need your carbohydrates. You need your vitamins. You need your minerals. You need all of these things. I hear people going on these weight loss diets where you leave out a whole section of the necessary nutrients for your body. That's not a healthy thing to do. What we need is a balanced diet with all of the nutrients, but in proper proportions. It's the proportions that do us in. Okay, moving right along. Exercise. Exercise. We need to move. We need to move. Even individuals who suffer from certain disorders that limit their mobility. That's why we have physical therapy, because people need to move. It helps with our circulation. It helps with our ability to think. And also it increases endorphins and neurotransmitters that help us to feel better. So if you're feeling better, you're going to think better, you're going to act better, and you're going to do a better job. Relaxation techniques that can be learned. Even a simple thing as sitting down for 15 seconds and just kind of just sitting there. it can be effective in helping us to learn to relax. Socialization, we're social creatures. We must interact with other human beings at some level. And when we increase our socialization, our positive socialization, it helps us in managing our stress. Creative expression such as art or music also help us to reduce stress. We must become more self-aware and self-knowing. And this takes time, which means that we must carve out time in our days to think and reason and become aware of our own strengths and skills and preferences or capabilities and how these capabilities can be applied. We must learn new strategies for dealing with the stressors in our lives. We must become aware of the areas in which we need further development and areas in which we have weaknesses. It is not okay to just know about our strengths and not our weaknesses. That again is an imbalance. And as I said before, we were designed to function in equilibrium or homeostasis. So some risk factors. I'm skipping a little bit because I think we're shortly going to be out of time, but we are some risk factors for developing burnout. If you strongly identify with work to the extent that you lack balance between your work life and your personal life, that is a risk factor for developing burnout, because you become so engrossed in work, and if anything goes wrong with work, that becomes your whole focus, because you're identifying so much with your work that you take failures and setbacks personally, as opposed to this is a part of my life. And it's not everything in my life that's going wrong, maybe just this one thing or these two things, and I need to address them. When you have a high workload, including overtime work, that is another risk factor. When you try to be everything to everyone, so, you know, your boss says, can you do an extra shift or 2 extra shifts next week? And really, you know that you can't, because you have a responsibility at home for something else or something else. I tell you, the word no, it only has 2 letters. And yet it is so difficult for people to say. And yet it is essential to be able to say that short word, no. It is a complete answer. You have to use it sometimes if you want to escape the dangers of stress and burnout. Working in a profession such as healthcare has its own risk of burnout. When you feel that you have little or no control over your work, and this is where communication with administration can come in, because if administration cares about their workers or their human resources and the quality that their organization produces, they will try to have a collaborative atmosphere in which someone who is a healthcare professional can feel comfortable to express their desires and their needs within the workplace. If you feel that your job is monotonous, that is also another risk factor for burnout. So the person who experiences burnout, some of the consequences are excessive stress, fatigue, insomnia, sadness, anger, or irritability, alcohol or substance abuse or misuse, heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and vulnerability to illnesses because your immune system is compromised. A stressful work environment can contribute to problems such as stomachache, sleep disturbances, short temper, and difficulty concentrating. Chronic stress can result in anxiety, insomnia, high blood pressure, weakened immune system. It can also contribute to health conditions such as depression, obesity, and heart disease. Oh, I went a little bit too fast that time. So coping with stress, here's a pattern that you could follow to assist in coping with stress. Evaluate your options. There are always options. Every problem has a solution. It's just that in the moment you don't know what it is yet. So evaluate your options. Seek support. Try a relaxing activity. Get some exercise. Get some sleep. Practice mindfulness. And keep an open mind as you consider the options. Try not to let a demanding or unrewarding healthcare job affect your health. Self-care is an ethical duty. The International Council of Nurses, the International Council of Nurses, in their code of ethics for nurses, they state that to facilitate healing within others, nurses must undertake healing within themselves. This is a lifelong process that ebbs and flows with the events impacting in our journey. Honor the unique development of your intellectual, psychological, social, and spiritual self and body through practice, self-reflection, and education. This develops authentic and deep introspection needed to grow from within. So self-care is an ethical duty for all nurses. Some benefits of self-care. Self-care is a stress management tool. If you take care of yourself, then stress will not have the detrimental effects that it could have. Self-care replenishes a nurse's empathy and compassion. Self-care helps nurses to effectively manage the physical and emotional stresses of the work and home environments to become more effective caregivers and healers. And because we're multidimensional creatures, we all have a spiritual aspect to our beings. And usually when we hear the word spiritual, people often think immediately of religions and denominations, but that is not all there is to spirituality. Spiritual self-care addresses the ongoing search for meaning and understanding in life and what may extend beyond. We all have this existential curiosity about why we're here and what's the meaning of the things that we do and what will happen beyond all of this. Spiritual self-care can be facilitated in numerous ways, from simply watching the sunrise to becoming active in organized religion or other spiritual communities. Research indicates that religious involvement is a factor in increased longevity and improved health outcomes. Also, religious involvement has some stress buffering effects in instances where people are experiencing multiple negative life events. Like, for example, now that we're going through the COVID crisis, and this is an unusual event that is creating a lot of stress both on healthcare workers and people in general. Religious involvement has its stress buffering effect. Religion also benefits people's mental health through increased social support and a healthier lifestyle due to religious prohibitions. So the very things that people sometimes object to in religious practices are the things that can help us to overcome stress and that can actually keep us healthy. So not eating certain things or not ingesting certain things that we know are harmful to us actually can keep us healthier and stronger and less stressed. So nurses, remember that we have an ethical duty for self-care, and self-care involves the physical, the mental, the social, and the spiritual. Thank you so much for your attention and for your patience when my PowerPoint went down. Are there any questions?
There's one in the text. Do you think the relationship between doctors and nurses can cause distress? Some
Yes,
doctors
indeed.
humiliate nurses, and that can cause sadness.
Absolutely. I practiced nursing for bedside nursing for 20 years before I went on to do other things. And I'm still a registered nurse, active. And one of the most distressing things is to be disrespected by a colleague who should be a colleague, really. But in some, especially in some cultural settings, there is this hierarchical system that causes some individuals to think themselves better than other individuals, even though we're both working towards the same common goal. And so, yes, that can definitely cause stress. However, this goes back to what we talked about in terms of being assertive. It is not essential to any criteria for you to accept disrespect. I believe that every individual is deserving of respect. And so it depends on how you tend to relate and interact with other people sometimes. Some people are just rude and will be rude no matter what you do or who you are. But you can start the ball rolling in any case by being assertive. being respectful yourself, because I believe that respect generates respect in other people. So we must be respectful to others, but we must not accept disrespect either. And we must state our truths appropriately and clearly so that it is understood that you are a person of worth and you deserve to be respected, and that you did not appreciate and will not tolerate being disrespected. That's my stance. That's my answer. Any other questions?
Can I add something to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So I think it would be a good follow-up session to really provide concrete examples of how to do it. For example, a role-playing situation, because I see this happening all the time. And, you know, you read about it, be assertive. But when in the actual situation, how do you really do it?
And that is going to be a great topic for one of our JAMINARs.
Yes, yes.
Yes, indeed.
We can give nurses concrete tools of how to have a difficult conversation, because sometimes it's not going to be nice, you're not going to be rude, but you have to stand up and be assertive and just let whoever it is know that you're not going to be disrespected. And how do you actually do it?
Yes. And so, as I said, that is going to be a part of a future presentation. It's not really part of today's presentation. And what I'm really looking forward to is being there in person. As soon as this COVID crisis is over, we're going to be there. We're not keeping our distance. And so some of these things that we would normally be able to do, we might not be able to do it so easily now in this setting. But absolutely, I agree with you, Elaine, that demonstrating it is one of the best ways of teaching it. And, you know, I also am very conscious of the fact that even though I stated what my stance is and what my belief is and what it's necessary to be assertive, I do understand that there are cultural differences that makes it difficult sometimes to even behave in the way that you actually believe you should behave.
Yes.
Because the culture says, you know, these folks are better than these folks, or because the culture says in a job situation, this individual can behave in this way and it's okay and it's acceptable. But we can start to change the culture by our own behavior and our own expectations. So if, for example, in some settings, I know that in some situations, indeed, and I don't want to give physicians bad names because I have lots of friends who are physicians and they're not like this. But I know that there are situations that arise where the doctor feels that because he is the prescribing person, he has the authority and therefore he has the right to speak to other healthcare workers in any which way that he chooses to. That is not okay. And so between the actual nurse and the nurse who's working on the floor and nursing administration, steps need to be taken to set guidelines as to how healthcare workers will interact and communicate with each other. And next month, September, or next presentation, I will actually be covering that topic of interpersonal communication for healthcare workers. So we'll be talking more about this. Okay. Any other questions?
Dr. Gordon?
Yes.
It's not a question, but I just want to add that as nurses, I don't think some of us spend enough time to consider self-care. And I think one of the greatest challenge to that is the fact that many of our nurses are the breadwinner for the family, or they are the ones who are working most of the time. And so our focus is on meeting the needs of our family members and those around us rather than doing so for ourselves. But what I want to say to us is that while we wait for COVID to settle down, we can do simple things at home. We can give our own selves a pedicure, soak our feet in a little Epsom salt water and relax. We can sit down while we watch a movie or do a puzzle and drink a little wine and tell yourself that you're treating yourself to your own evening out. Find one evening for the week when you set the table and you invite the children and the rest of the family to sit and eat and you speak. And then after that, you play a game of card or tic-tac-toe or TikTok, or we play SOS, or you play domino, or you play checkers, but something that keeps you light and cause you to laugh, to get your hormones going and to keep you happy. And also what I find is that many of us don't spend enough time to drink enough water to flush our system and to enjoy that good feeling. And so we need to start, as you said, laugh at ourselves, enjoy the good feeling. Sometimes you have to curse your own selves rather than persons doing it for you. And then when you're finished, you say, no, pick yourself up, let's get going and let's do it, what we have to do. And so we have to find those small things that helps us to do it. And I find that doing some gardening, and sometimes you talk to the plant, you know who you're speaking with. So you're not mad. For me, I like to speak to myself because I prefer not to disturb persons. But you plant a tree, watch it grow, speak to it every day, plant a flower. If you can't take care of many, but you keep that little flower somewhere in the house or on the veranda, and you watch it grow and you speak to it and you cherish it and you do things. And I want to say, as nursing supervisors, we have to be mindful of it in ourselves as well as in our colleagues who we supervise. Because sometimes, though, as you have said, that we need to be mindful as to how we manage. One thing don't go for one set and it doesn't go for the other set. But as managers, we need to be cognizant that sometimes the behavior is because of the work pressures that they have been going through and not knowing how to manage it. And also wanting to work because we know we are short-staffed. But what I've been saying to our managers is that we must seek to recognize it in our nurses. And when you see they are feeling or not behaving the way you want and you speak with them, you roll out the policy manuals that you have and you say to them, these are the sanctions. Just say to them, how are you feeling? What frustrates you the most? And sometimes we have to rotate them out of a high healthcare demand area. So at A&Es, you will need to rotate your nurses out of it sometimes because it demands so much of them and they see so much trauma. And it is always hitting them. We have to rotate them around the compound to give them a break. And when we also recognize that, say to the nurse, I'm going to allow you to take a departmental leave with your weekend off or with your day off. So they have an additional time period off to rest. Sometimes as healthcare providers, we really don't have break time. Unlike you people who are in the US, we really don't have break time. It's not a must for us. And so for me, what I usually do is that I will keep things on my ward. And when my nurse is that busy and can't go, I say, stop, drink a little syrup, take 2 crackers, take a biscuit, and let us just take 2 couple deep breaths. And sometimes just stopping on the ward and say, let us take 10 deep breaths before we move on. That does work. And we really have to learn to breathe now because COVID has come to take our breaths away. So we have to practice and enjoy breathing. And so we have to be caring for each other as a supervisor. We too must recognize when so much is demanded from us and we are feeling drained, that we too take a deal with our day off and we seek to sit back sometime after working evening. You say, come colleagues, let's drink a little soda, drink some water, let's play a domino game, or you just talk about something, then you get up and you go home. Because home sometimes is another additional stress because you have the children to go home to the dinner, to cook, the place to tidy up. So in between both, you just have to take a little time. But let me stop here, I won't keep up the time.
No, that was very good. I mean, I believe you hit some really practical strategies that can be used on a day-to-day basis that could reduce stress. And I want to emphasize where I think we both talked about that ability to laugh and that ability to just see the positive side of things. You know, thank you so much. Are there any other questions or comments? Any information that anybody wants to share?
Hi, I'm Carmen. Hello. How are you? Thank you so much for all that wonderful food for thought. But I was also thinking, I don't practice nursing actively anymore, but I can remember in the early days of nursing, one of the things we were told about as nurses in terms of nursing theories is that your patient always comes first. And we have learned that our patients should come first. What we don't learn is that we have to come first. And so that, as you were saying, we have an ethical obligation to ourselves to take care of ourselves. And that really self-care is not a luxury. Self-care is an absolute necessity. And that we had to learn to take care of ourselves first. So we have the best us to be able to take care of others. Like you're saying, if you're burnt out, if you don't have it to give, what do you give? You can't give. So we have to learn how to give ourselves first, so we have our best selves to give others. So that the other thing I just wanted to point out is that when it comes to communication and communicating with each other as colleagues on the job, there is a thing, as you were mentioning, cultural stuff. And it's not only cultural, but certainly cultural. We have to learn to have that deep respect for ourselves. A lot of us don't know how to talk up for ourselves because we have this deep subconscious programming that I am not good enough. I am not good enough. And so I bring that into the workplace and into any interaction that we have to engage in with others. I am not good enough, so everyone else have the right to talk to me, however, and I'm afraid. And if I do try to talk up for myself, it comes out as anger because I don't know how to do it respectfully and to demand the respect from others in that way. So I just wanted to share that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. But if there are no further questions or comments, I believe we have come to the end of our presentations for today. And we look forward to being with you again on September 17th, when we will have a whole day of presentations from not only Ms. Amersing and myself, but other healthcare professionals. We will have a gynecologist, obstetrician, and nutritionist, and other nurse educators who will be presenting on that day from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Jamaica time.
Dr. Gordon and Ms. Amersing, I just want to say thank you for this wonderful presentation. I can see that a lot of people have benefited from what you've given today. And I'm not a nurse, I'm in education. I even had moments where I'm also benefiting from the things that you and the participants shared. Just want to encourage you to continue on the path of giving back, because that's really important to not, I know it makes you feel good, but it's important to others who are learning and want to be able to glean something that can advance their own personal life and their career.
Thank you so
much.
Okay, folks, have a good evening, and we'll see you next month.
You
Thank
too.
you. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.